Deadpool and Wolverine is a feast for longtime Marvel fans, but for those who have missed a few films over the years, some things almost certainly slipped by. Here's what you may not have caught. Deadpool isn't above mocking the Marvel Cinematic Universe, nor Marvel's Foxverse, but it's even more surprising to see the character make jests about the DC Universe, given the rivalry between the two studios. Still, Deadpool doesn't miss an opportunity to make a subtle joke at the expense of Black Adam, the DC film that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson claimed was going to change everything.
The hierarchy of power in the DC Universe is about to change.
That didn't exactly come to pass, given that Black Adam bombed at the box office. During the scene in Deadpool and Wolverine where Paradox is introducing Deadpool to the Time Variance Authority, Deadpool is entranced enough by the offer to join the MCU's main timeline to parrot Johnson's promise about how the power hierarchy of the universe was about to change. Take that, DC. While most of the variant Wolverines are references to various Marvel comics, the Cavill, the Wolverine played by Henry Cavill, serves to poke fun at Marvel's biggest competition in the superhero space. Upon meeting this variant, Deadpool says, "We'll treat you so much better than those assholes down the street," a clear dig at Warner Brothers' DC movies. Cavill famously played Superman in Man of Steel and its controversial sequels Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice and Justice League. After director Zack Snyder parted ways with the studio, WB wavered on where Superman fit into their continuing DC extended universe until Cavill returned for a cameo in the credits of Black Adam. WB ultimately scrapped the DCEU in favor of a reboot, and while some DCEU actors were invited back for the new James Gunn-ran cinematic universe, Henry Cavill wasn't among them. While there are a good 100 Deadpool variants in Deadpool and Wolverine, none impress Deadpool Prime as much as Mary Poppins, aka Dogpool. When he sees the dog, he immediately falls in love and has some disturbingly intimate exchanges with Dogpool's incredibly long tongue. The dog is played by Peggy, and it's not a hyperbole to say she's Britain's ugliest dog. Putting that aside, Deadpool is quite taken with her, and he even goes so far as to call her something special after meeting Nicepool. Deadpool Prime tells Nicepool, quote, "If you can't be a responsible pet owner, then maybe you shouldn't have this little unicorn." When it comes to Deadpool, there's no higher compliment than calling someone or something a unicorn. For whatever reason, Deadpool is obsessed with unicorns in the films. Of course, his love of the mythical beasts goes back further in the comics. There aren't too many books featuring the merc with a mouth that don't include unicorn references, and they play a large role in marketing his films. While Dogpool isn't a unicorn, simply referring to her as such is all any fan needs to know that Deadpool absolutely loves her, though not necessarily in a healthy manner. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has gotten a lot of flack in recent years for predictable dialogue. One such example of this is the trope of characters saying, "He's right behind me, isn't he?" as a big bad guy is approaching them. Recently, this was done without irony in Thor: Love and Thunder.
Being very careful not to bump into any of those big shadow monsters. They're behind me, aren't they?
In typical Ryan Reynolds fashion, one line in Deadpool and Wolverine references this common criticism. After Deadpool brings yellow-suited Wolverine back from his timeline, the wasted Wolverine collapses on the ground as Paradox explains to Deadpool that not only is it too late to save his friends from dying, but the Wolverine he brought back is notoriously the worst Wolverine in the entire multiverse. As Deadpool chews out Paradox, Wolverine wakes up from his drunken daze, giving Deadpool the perfect opportunity to say, "He's right behind me, isn't he?" In Deadpool 2, Wade Wilson also takes a dig at the cliché when he gives Weasel a threatening rant about what he's going to do to Cable.
Or a homemade mating drum. He's standing right behind you, isn't he?
Hopefully acknowledging the criticism means Marvel will take extra care in the future to fine-tune its dialogue. Deadpool and Wolverine begins with a delightfully gory opening credit sequence, wherein the merc with a mouth uses Wolverine's adamantium skeleton to slaughter a team of TVA agents to the tune of the in-sync hit Bye Bye Bye. It's the first of many pop needle drops in the film, but you might not realize that its inclusion was all but promised in the marketing for the previous Deadpool movie. At the end of the music video for Ashes, the Deadpool 2 opening credit song by Celine Dion, Deadpool applauds Dion's performance before telling her it's too good for Deadpool 2, and she needs to tone it down. When Dion refuses to do the song over, telling Spider-Man to beat it, Deadpool responds by saying,
God, I should have asked NSYNC.
Sure enough, they did ask NSYNC for the next film. Fans of the Korean pop group Stray Kids were likely excited to hear the band's voices while watching Deadpool and Wolverine. Their new single Slash was written for the film's soundtrack after Ryan Reynolds fell in love with their work several years ago. On a musical competition show called Kingdom Legendary War back in 2021, they opened up one of their live performances by having band member Felix recreate the start of the opening action sequence from the original Deadpool film. Mimicking Reynolds dangling his legs off an overpass, Felix breaks the fourth wall and jokes around with the audience before sliding off his perch into a crowd of dancers. Reynolds saw the performance and reached out, developing a friendship with some of the group's members, and at one point toying with the idea of giving them all on-screen cameos in Deadpool and Wolverine. He shared during a press conference for the film. The initial plan was to have them appear in the film, but with the strike happening in the middle of production and so many other issues, it just became logistically impossible. The sheer size of the group was also apparently an anxiety, with the star adding, "I'll never forget the look on our line producer's face when I said that there are 8 of them." Among the many members of the Deadpool core are 2 juvenile versions of the character, Kidpool and Babypool. Kidpool has had a long history in the comics. He's a variant of Wade Wilson who attends Professor Xavier's orphanage for troubled boys. The characters don't get a lot of screen time, but they were very important for Ryan Reynolds. Kidpool is played by his daughter Inez, who was born in 2016, while Babypool is the newest member of the Reynolds family, Olin Reynolds, who was born in 2023. Considering that Reynolds' wife, Blake Lively, also appears in the same sequence as Lady Deadpool, it's quite sweet that the Deadpool core was a family affair. It also marks the first time his kids have shown up on screen in one of his movies. Reynolds properly thanked them at the film's premiere, saying, "I hope that, if I'm lucky, this moment will be the most traumatic thing, that is, the contents of this movie, that happens in your wondrous life." By this point, Reynolds and Lively's children are quite used to international attention since their godmother Taylor Swift name-checked them in her song Betty in 2020. Hopefully, Inez's portrayal of Kidpool means that the father-daughter duo can share some screen time together in a future Deadpool movie. Deadpool's ability to break the fourth wall and speak directly to the audience comes straight from the comics and has been a part of Deadpool's cinematic journey since he had his head chopped off at the end of X-Men Origins Wolverine. The Deadpool trilogy doesn't disappoint when it comes to fourth wall breaks, but what about his many variants? The Deadpool and Wolverine Deadpool core consists of around 100 variants, but only one of them shows that they have the ability to break the fourth wall. Upon meeting Deadpool Prime and Wolverine again in the third act, Nicepool notices his counterpart's fourth wall break when he makes a Van Wilder reference, which is an allusion to Reynolds' breakout film role. Hearing this, Nicepool says, while turning to face the camera, "I can gently tap the fourth wall too, The Proposal." Reynolds starred in The Proposal opposite Sandra Bullock. What a nice, gentle tap. The special thanks section of the end credits of Deadpool and Wolverine saves a few spots for some hilarious references. One example is Truthful Timmy, which is a reference to something Deadpool says earlier in the film. It's a pretty R-rated joke about Deadpool's nickname, the Merc with the Mouth. For the job of Hugh Jackman Wrangler, special thanks is given to Betty Reynolds, Ryan Reynolds, and Blake Lively's middle daughter. Reynolds expanded on just what Hugh Jackman wrangling was at the film's premiere, telling people, "My 4-year-old Betty sort of loves Hugh, like unconditionally, and she expresses that love through unblinking violence." It seems that Hugh Jackman Wrangler might actually be a much more dangerous job than a special thanks really gives credit for. Other names listed include Stanley's daughter, J.C. Lee, as well as the various comic book creators. The Deadpool movies have never been particularly precious about the targets of their irreverent humor.
No, I spit acidic vomit.
We've all eaten at Arby's.
Wade Wilson is known for being as brutal with insults as he is with his knives and guns. So when fans learned he'd be joining the MCU, many were curious how this dynamic would evolve. After all, Marvel Studios is owned by the Walt Disney Company, a brand so protective of itself that it was hard to imagine how any of Deadpool's usually crass humor would survive. As it turns out, Ryan Reynolds and Sean Levy didn't have to hold back much, going so far as to acknowledge and openly mock the critical rut the MCU is in right now. When Hugh Jackman's Wolverine variant stirs from his drunken stupor in the TVA headquarters, Wade welcomes him to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but snarks that they're both, quote, joining at a low point. While one could read this line as Deadpool referencing the moral low point of his universe being destroyed, it seems more fitting that he's giving the audience a knowing wink about what joining the MCU means now versus back in 2019. The MCU famously references Back to the Future in Avengers Endgame while the heroes discuss time travel. When Ant-Man explains how he thinks time travel works, the Hulk corrects him. Ant-Man looks dejected and says,
"So Back to the Future is a bunch of bullshit."
But that's not the only Back to the Future reference in the MCU. In Deadpool and Wolverine, Deadpool travels the Marvel multiverse looking for a replacement Logan to take the place of his reality's anchor being. As he travels through time and space from one reality to another, The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News plays in the background. The song begins playing as a multitude of Logan variants introduce Deadpool to their claws. The Power of Love is a prominent fixture of the Back to the Future trilogy, and Huey Lewis actually appears in the first film, as Marty McFly plays an instrumental rendition of The Power of Love. For a Battle of the Bands audition, Lewis stops him mid-song and tells him,
"I'm afraid you're just too darn loud."
There are plenty of cameos in Deadpool and Wolverine, but some of them are a little more subtle. While fans of the Reynolds family might easily recognize Blake Lively's voice behind the mask of Lady Deadpool, they might miss a few of the other members of the Deadpool corps. Most notably, Matthew McConaughey contributes the voice for Cowboy Deadpool, which marks the iconic actor's first appearance in the MCU after he turned down the role of Ego in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. McConaughey has also been on record as saying he wants to play the Incredible Hulk. Seems like a missed opportunity to have had him play the character fighting Wolverine earlier in the film. Another Deadpool variant is Headpool, the zombified, disembodied head of Wade Wilson who made his comic debut in 2006. This version of Deadpool is voiced by Nathan Fillion, who is not a newcomer to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Fillion previously cameoed in both Guardians of the Galaxy and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Although Headpool's appearance is very brief, the character is memorable enough to get a popcorn bucket from AMC theaters. Other Deadpools that appear in the Deadpool core scene don't have many speaking lines, but reference comic characters, including Deadpool 2099, Zenpool, and Roninpool.